I still remember the exact sentence my boss screamed at me in front of 80 people. You have 48 hours to clear your desk if you don't like how I run this department. And the worst part, I didn't say a word back. It was our quarterly all hands. The kind of meeting where they bring in stale pastries and cheap coffee and pretend we're a family. We were in the big glass conference room on the 12th floor, the one with the fake plants and the motivational posters about integrity and ownership. It was a Wednesday morning, 9 a.m., and I watched my own career get put on a countdown timer between a slide about record growth and another about employee engagement. My name's Ethan. I'm the guy in your office who always sits near the back, takes notes, keeps his camera on in Zoom meetings, answers emails on time, fixes other people's Excel formulas, and doesn't make trouble. Senior data analyst. 5 years in the same company. 3 under the same manager. The guy you trust with the messy spreadsheet, but never invite to after-work drinks. My boss, Collins, was the opposite. Loud, confident, always with a story about crushing a deadline or saving a deal at the last minute. Upper management loved him. He knew everyone's name, remembered their kids' birthdays, told the kind of jokes that made the VP laugh just a bit too loudly. On paper, we were a good team. His charisma, my numbers, on paper. He was halfway through his presentation when I realized he'd actually done it. Slide 14. Q2 client retention, 96%. I stared at the number like it was written in another language. 96. I'd run that report 3 times the night before. The real figure, the one I'd sent him in an email at 11:23 p.m., was 88. We'd lost 3 mid-tier clients and a small enterprise account. The kind of things that happen in business, uncomfortable but normal. The kind of things you document honestly, unless you're trying to impress someone. He clicked to the next slide, talking about incredible discipline and flawless execution, but I barely heard him. My brain was doing math automatically, matching what was on the screen with the SQL queries in my head. There was no way you got to 96 without adjustment. The thing is, this wasn't out of nowhere. A week earlier, Collins had walked over to my desk with that fake casualness managers get when they're about to say something they know is wrong. "Hey, Ethan, quick one," he said, leaning against the partition. "We're so close to our retention target. If you exclude those non-core clients and the ones that churned for reasons outside our control, where do we land?" "Depends how you define non-core," I said. I already knew where this was going. He smiled like we were sharing a secret. "Let's just look at strategic accounts, the ones that really reflect our long-term health." I pulled the numbers. Even then, with his definition, we still didn't hit 96. I sent him the sanitized version anyway with a polite note. For clarity, this excludes these 4 churned accounts and focuses on strategic clients, as discussed. He replied with a thumbs-up emoji and nothing else. No change this, no update that, just. So when the 96 showed up on that giant screen, in front of the VP of Operations, HR, Finance, and half the company, it wasn't an accident. He'd taken my work, moved the goalposts again, and hoped no one in the room knew the difference between a metric and a marketing slogan. He was wrong about one person. He finished his speech with, "This is what happens when everyone in this room pulls in the same direction." People clapped. Some of them probably believed it. Some of them just knew when they were supposed to clap. Before I realized what I was doing, my hand was in the air. I don't normally speak in those meetings. I'm the guy you email afterward when the dashboard looks weird. But my heart was pounding in my ears, and something inside me snapped in this very quiet, very controlled way. "Yeah, Ethan?" Collins said, mic still in his hand. His smile looked friendly if you didn't know him. I did. I cleared my throat. On slide 14, the retention number. Could you clarify which cohort you used? Because the last extraction I ran was showing 88%, including strategic accounts. The room didn't go silent. It's not a movie. People shifted in their chairs, some pretended to check their phones, But the air changed. The VP glanced up. Someone in HR stopped typing. For half a second, Collins looked surprised. Not guilty, not scared. Just surprised that I had said anything out loud. Then his face hardened. "We'll discuss technical details offline," he said, still smiling at the room, not at me. "This meeting is about alignment, not nitpicking." I could have let it go. I should have. Maybe. But the word nitpicking hit me like a slap. I'd been cleaning up his nitpicks for 3 years. "With respect," I said, and I heard a couple of heads turn at that phrase. "It's not just a technical detail. That number is materially different from what's in our system. If leadership is making decisions based on it, I think it matters that we're clear on the definition." There it was. Not a speech, not a rebellion. Just a simple, factual sentence that, in any sane company, would have started a calm conversation. Instead, Collins laughed. Into the mic, in front of everyone. "You know what your problem is, Ethan," he said, still smiling. "Still performing? You're so deep in the weeds with your queries. You forget the big picture." He looked around the room as if inviting everyone to enjoy the joke. "We're not here to debate decimals." I felt my face getting hot. "It's 8 percentage points," I said quietly. "That's not a decimal." His smile dropped. He turned fully toward me, now, mic in hand. Eyes narrowed in that way I'd seen in one-on-ones when he thought I was being difficult. "You don't like how I run this department?" he said. His voice got louder, sharper. "You don't like how I choose to present our success?" "I'm saying the numbers," he cut me off. "No. What you're doing is undermining leadership in front of the entire team." He took a step closer, as if we were on a stage no one else had paid to see. "If you have an issue with me, you bring it to me. You don't try to embarrass me in a company-wide meeting." I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't called him a liar. I had asked for a definition. But in that moment, it didn't matter. He needed a villain, and I was convenient. "You have 48 hours, he said, and now the room did go quiet. 48 hours to decide if you still want to be here. If you don't like how I run this department, you can clear your desk and find somewhere else that appreciates your decimals." Someone coughed. Someone else shifted their chair so hard it squeaked. On the far side of the table, I saw Priya, one of the only people I actually liked at work, go pale. HR looked down at her laptop like the keyboard had suddenly become fascinating. The VP did nothing. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. Not because I was scared, though I was, but because there was nothing I could say in that room that wouldn't make it worse. You can't win an argument with someone who controls your performance reviews and has a microphone. So I just nodded once. Understood. The rest of the meeting went on like nothing had happened. More slides, more buzzwords. At one point, someone asked a question about parking. People laughed again. When it ended, chairs scraped, laptops closed, and everyone poured out into the hallway, pretending we hadn't all watched my boss put a timer on my job like it was nothing. On the way out, Priya brushed past me and squeezed my arm. It was quick, almost invisible. "That was messed up," she whispered. "Are you okay?" "Yeah," I lied. "I'm fine." Back at my desk, I had a new email already waiting, from Collins. Subject: Professionalism. "Ethan, today's behavior was unacceptable and not aligned with our culture of trust. We will be having a performance discussion on Friday to address your fit within the team." C. No mention of the 48 hours. Nothing you could screenshot and send to HR without looking like you were overreacting. Just enough corporate varnish to make it seem reasonable. I stared at that email for a long time. Then I opened a different folder, not on the company drive, on my personal laptop. It was called Collins Miss C. It started as a place to dump odd things. Slack screenshots where he'd suggested rounding up numbers for optics. Emails where he'd rephrased my reports before sending them upward. Calendar notes from meetings that never happened. There were more files in there than I remembered. I scrolled through them slowly, heart rate finally starting to steady. I replayed his sentence in my head. "You have 48 hours to clear your desk." He thought he was giving me a deadline to disappear. I didn't know it yet, not fully, but those 48 hours weren't going to decide whether I stayed quiet or left. They were going to decide who actually ended up clearing their desk. The morning after that meeting felt unreal, like waking up after a storm you didn't see coming. My alarm went off at 6:30 a.m., as usual, same dull chime, same gray light slipping through the blinds, but everything around me felt slightly displaced. My laptop bag was by the door, my badge on the counter, my shoes lined up like always, except now every object looked like it might be leaving with me for the last time. I showered, shaved, packed my lunch, all by muscle memory, and the whole time a thought tugged quietly at the back of my mind. He didn't fire you, he threatened you. There's a difference. I kept replaying the meeting, not the shouting, but the silence afterward, the way people avoided my eyes, the way HR closed her laptop like shutting a door, the way Collins had practically smiled when he said 48 hours. He thought I'd panic. He thought I'd apologize. He thought he'd scared me into obedience. But that was just the beginning. When I got to the office, the atmosphere was painfully normal. People talked about commute times. Someone reheated leftover curry that smelled like it could melt drywall. The TVs in the lobby looped the same corporate highlight reel with stock music and fake diversity photos. Nothing reflected what had happened. As I walked to my desk, conversations softened. Eyes flicked away. A few coworkers gave me quick, polite nods, professional sympathy without commitment. Only Priya mouthed, "You good?" I nodded back. No more. Her kindness meant something, but I wasn't going to pull her into this. Before I even logged in, my calendar pinged. Performance discussion, Friday, 10 a.m. Organizer, Collins. No agenda. No HR. A bluff. If he were serious about terminating me, HR would have been involved already. If he wanted me gone quietly, he'd schedule something sooner. Friday meant he wanted time, maybe to rewrite history, maybe to bury mine. Around noon, I walked into the break room to get water. Two colleagues, Jonas from Sales Analytics and Claire from Customer Insights, were whispering about the meeting. They hadn't seen me come in. I mean, who corrects the boss in front of the VP? Jonas said. She didn't look like she cared, Claire whispered. And Collins was furious. He's been on edge for months. Jonas sighed. He wants that director role. He's been polishing numbers since Q1. My hand froze on the water dispenser. Numbers. Polishing. I stepped back before they noticed me and returned to my desk. I didn't blame them. They were trying to survive like everyone else. But their words confirmed something I'd quietly suspected. My clash with Collins wasn't personal. It was structural. He needed perfect metrics, needed them so badly he'd rather rewrite reality than admit loss. Around 1:30 p.m., someone unexpected stopped by my desk. Kevin, a senior analyst from strategy, a guy with a reputation for keeping his head down, avoiding office politics, doing his job, then going home to his dog and his woodworking hobby. He slipped a sticky note toward me without making eye contact. "Careful," he said softly. "He's done this before." I looked at the note. A date, a name, a short phrase. Retention adjustments, just for internal optics. "What happened?" I asked quietly. Kevin shrugged, eyes scanning the room. I pushed back, got sidelined until I quit. He paused. "Just document everything. That's all I'll say." He walked away before I could respond. And then silence, the kind that means something's gone wrong. Because a minute later, Collins appeared from around the corner, smiling too wide, holding a coffee he hadn't touched. He looked at my desk, then down the hallway where Kevin had gone. His jaw tensed for a second before he masked it with more false friendliness. "Ethan," he said brightly, "quick check-in?" At that tone, I knew he'd noticed the shift. He wasn't just angry anymore. He was nervous. We went into a small conference room. Glass walls, no blinds, typical corporate terrarium. He shut the door carefully, too carefully. "Look," he began, leaning forward with exaggerated patience. Yesterday got heated. I want to give you the benefit of the doubt. You're a smart guy, but you can't undermine leadership like that. We need alignment, not friction. I didn't respond. He mistook my silence for guilt. If you want to stay here, he continued, you need to show me you're committed. No more interruptions in front of senior staff. No more questioning strategic decisions. Strategic decisions. That's what he was calling fraud now. And Ethan, he added, lowering his voice, I need you to be flexible with the data. Everyone is, whether they admit it or not. It's how business works. There it was, not explicit enough for a court, but explicit enough for me. I kept my expression neutral. Understood. He smiled, relieved, thinking he'd regained control. He dismissed me with a pat on the shoulder that made my skin crawl. As I walked out, he called after me, and let's keep things positive until Friday, yeah? Positive. I went back to my desk and opened the folder I'd started the night before. I added timestamps, Slack threads, the email with the real retention numbers, the message where he asked for strategic framing, everything organized, categorized, backed up to encrypted storage. Then something occurred to me. If he had pressured others before, there might be more than my documentation. There might be a pattern, and patterns matter. At 4:10 p.m., I opened the company's internal site and navigated to the Code of Conduct. Boring reading, dry, written by lawyers who bill by the hour. But under financial integrity and reporting, one line stood out. Employees are protected from retaliation when reporting suspected manipulation of financial or operational data through the ethics hotline or directly to the audit committee. Protected, explicitly, legally. I leaned back in my chair. For the first time since the meeting, my heartbeat slowed. Not because I felt safe, because now I had a root, a real one. As I packed my things to leave, I noticed something. No one was making eye contact anymore. Not out of discomfort, but out of anticipation. Word had traveled. They didn't know what I was doing, but they knew something was shifting. When I stepped into the elevator, Priya slipped in at the last second. You're not just taking this, right? She whispered. I hesitated. I'm thinking. She nodded like she already knew. Good, you should. The elevator dinged. The doors opened. She walked out without looking back. That night, in my apartment, with the lights low and the city humming outside, I laid everything out. Emails, notes, screenshots, timelines. And as I started building the report that would change everything, I realized something with absolute clarity. He gave me 48 hours to clear my desk. I was going to use those same 48 hours to clear his record. I sent the report at 7:42 a.m. on Thursday, not through some dramatic mass email. Not through a leak, not through anything reckless, just 3 carefully chosen channels. 1. The external ethics hotline, the one run by a third-party vendor, whose link sits buried at the bottom of the Code of Conduct. 2. The CFO's direct inbox, with a concise subject line, data integrity concerns, documentation attached. 3. The audit committee's email, listed publicly in our governance disclosure. Everything I sent was factual. Dates, screenshots, Slack messages where Collins phrased things as strategic adjustments, meeting notes where he interpreted numbers before sending them upward, my email with the real retention rate, his presentation slide with the false one, no accusations, no adjectives, just truth in chronological order. After hitting send, I didn't feel victorious. I felt steady, like the noise in my head had finally gone silent. By 9:15, the first ripple hit. A calendar invite popped up. Confidential check-in, HR and compliance. No organizer listed. Mandatory. 5 minutes later, another CFO, clarification on documentation, 15 may need. And at 9:30, one more. All department staff, mandatory meeting tomorrow. 9:00 a.m. Organizer, Human Resources, not Collins. I stared at that last one for a long time. Something had shifted behind the scenes, and even without details, The shape of it was unmistakable. That was when I realized I thought they'd quietly bury it. I was wrong. HR's meeting was first. Just me, HR's senior manager, and a compliance officer I'd never seen before. A quiet woman with a legal pad and a calm expression. They weren't warm. They weren't hostile. They were precise. "Thank you for coming forward," the compliance officer said. "We want to verify a few points in your documentation." Not once did they ask, "Are you sure?" Not once did they defend him. They asked about access logs, timelines, who attended which meetings. They asked how often Collins had requested adjustments, whether others were present, whether his directives conflicted with documented company policy. I answered everything, calm, measured, factual. When it ended, HR said, "You are not under investigation. You will not face disciplinary action during this process." That told me everything. They already suspected this wasn't an isolated incident. My call with the CFO was even more revealing. CFOs aren't dramatic. They don't raise their voices. They don't ask open-ended questions. They ask questions that already have answers. They just want to confirm who else knows them. This email you sent on June 19th, where you clarified the retention discrepancy. Did Mr. Collins respond before the meeting? "No," I said. And this Slack message where he asks for framing that supports our growth narrative. Has he asked for similar adjustments before? "Yes," she nodded once. No emotion, just acknowledgement. Then she said something that made my hands go cold. "These metrics were used in our Q2 investor call." A pause, a slow breath, and then, "Thank you, Ethan. That's all for now." That wasn't gratitude. That was preparation. The office felt strange for the rest of the day, quiet in a way that wasn't natural. People kept glancing at Colin's empty office, then at me, then away again like they didn't want to get caught looking at either. Around 3 p.m., I finally saw him. He stormed back from a meeting I hadn't known he had, face flushed, tie loosened, eyes burning with the kind of anger reserved for someone who realizes a fire is spreading but doesn't know where the flames are coming from. He walked straight to his office without looking at anyone, slammed the door, hard enough that 2 monitors on nearby desks rattled. 10 minutes later, he re-emerged and marched toward HR. As he passed me, his jaw clenched, eyes locking onto mine for half a second. In that half second, I saw the exact moment realization dawned. Not certainty, but suspicion and fear. He didn't say a word. That night, I barely slept. Not because I was afraid of losing my job. At that point, the job felt secondary, but because I didn't know how far this would go. I expected an email, a warning, a notice, something. Instead, the only thing in my inbox when I logged in Friday morning was the reminder. Mandatory department meeting. 9 a.m. The organizer was HR. The co-host was the CFO. Collins was not listed. At 8:57, the meeting room filled with people who looked like they'd walked into the wrong funeral. Cameras on. Microphones muted. Everyone pretending this was routine. I joined. My camera stayed on. At $9 sharp, HR began. "Thank you for joining on short notice. We have an important compliance matter to address regarding recent discrepancies in reported operational metrics." No preamble. No softening. The CFO slipped into frame next, her voice calm and surgical. "We have identified serious irregularities in the preparation and presentation of Q2 retention metrics," she said. "These irregularities were not created by staff analysts. They originated from directives given by management." A murmur rippled through the call. Someone muted themselves too late. The sound of a sharp inhale cut through the speakers. Then the CFO continued. "Effective immediately, Mr. Collins has been placed on administrative leave pending the conclusion of our internal investigation." That sentence hit the room like cold water. Collins wasn't there to defend himself. He wasn't there at all. The CFO added, "We want to thank those who came forward with information. Integrity in reporting is essential to our company's operations and our legal obligations." My heartbeat slowed, almost painfully. They'd believed me. No, more than that. They'd found enough evidence on their own to move swiftly. HR stepped back in, addressing process, confidentiality, expectations. The meeting lasted less than 10 minutes. It ended the same way the previous one had begun, with a silence so loud it felt physical. Except this time the silence wasn't aimed at me. As cameras clicked off one by one, only 3 remained on: mine, HR's, and the CFO's. I didn't say a word, didn't smile, didn't move. I just watched as the CFO gave a small, acknowledging nod before she left the call. I sat alone in the empty meeting room window on my screen, and as the adrenaline finally loosened its grip on my ribs, a single steady thought settled in. 2 days ago, he gave me 48 hours to clear my desk. Today, the company gave him less than 5 minutes to clear his. I didn't walk into the office expecting applause. I didn't expect people to look at me differently or to treat me like a hero. And they didn't. Most people kept their heads down, pretending not to know anything. That was normal. That was real. Offices don't transform overnight just because one man gets removed. But something had changed, and it wasn't the company. It was me. The day after the announcement, HR asked me to come in for a follow-up conversation. Their tone was different this time. Measured, respectful, intentional. No soft corporate smiles, no "let's circle back." The senior HR manager and the compliance officer sat across from me at a small table, both with folders open. "Ethan," the HR manager began, "we want to acknowledge your role in helping us correct a serious issue. You acted in accordance with company policy and with professionalism." Professionalism. The same word Collins had thrown at me like a weapon 2 days earlier. Now it was being used the way it was meant to be used. The compliance officer slid a document toward me. "We've completed a preliminary internal review. Based on what we found, it's clear the discrepancies were not initiated by you or any other analyst." She paused, chose her next words carefully. "Your documentation was consistent and accurate. That helped us move quickly." Oh, no praise, no dramatics, just truth. And truth was enough. Then HR added, "We want to ensure you feel safe continuing your work here. To that end, we'd like to offer you a transfer to a different team under a different director. There will be a title adjustment and compensation change to reflect your responsibilities and your performance record." It was subtle but unmistakable. They wanted me to stay, not out of pity, not out of fear, because they finally saw what I actually brought to the table. I didn't say yes immediately. I asked questions about the role, the expectations, the reporting structure, the workload. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't negotiating from a place of insecurity. I was choosing what I wanted my next chapter to look like. When the meeting ended, HR gave me one more document, a formal clearing of all performance concerns, including Colin's email, in writing. That mattered more than the raise. The next few days were quiet, but a different kind of quiet. People weren't avoiding me. They were cautious, respectful, sometimes even grateful. A few stopped by my desk when no one was around. "You did the right thing," one whispered. "I knew something was off with the numbers," said another. "I wanted to say something months ago," admitted a third, her voice shaking a little. I didn't judge any of them. Most workplaces punish honesty, reward silence, and promote the loudest liar in the room. Speaking up isn't a personality trait, it's a calculation, one that usually doesn't end well. My calculation was different, not because I was braver, but because I was tired. Tired of swallowing things that didn't belong to me. Tired of smoothing over other people's messes. Tired of telling myself it wasn't worth the fight. When I filed that report, I wasn't thinking about justice or revenge. I was thinking about freedom. Collins, of course, didn't go quietly. Rumors trickled in from people who still had friends in management. He'd hired a lawyer, claimed it was a misunderstanding, tried arguing that strategic interpretation was standard practice. He even hinted at discrimination claims, though no one could figure out on what basis. But none of it stuck. Compliance had the data trails. The audit team had the discrepancies. The CFO had the investor call on record. By the end of the week, he was officially terminated for cause. No farewell email, no team lunch, no thank you for your service. Just a security escort and a deactivated badge. That was the only ending that ever made sense. My new team was different from the start. Clear expectations, transparent communication, a director who valued accuracy more than optics, people who asked questions because they wanted the truth, not because they wanted the version that made their slide decks prettier. And me? I wasn't the same person who'd sat quietly in that conference room, pretending not to notice the cracks under our metrics. I started setting boundaries. Not dramatic ones, just clear ones. No, I can't take on that project without adjusting my workload. No, that deadline isn't realistic unless we remove 2 deliverables. No, I won't submit a report until the numbers are verified. People respected it, because I respected it. A few months later, when a senior VP tried to informally suggest that the Q3 churn number could be presented with more optimism, I didn't hesitate. I'm not comfortable altering data, I said. If you'd like a breakdown by cohort or category, I can do that. But the final number has to stay factual. He blinked, then nodded, and never pushed again. Boundaries aren't loud, they're firm. I kept working at the company for another year, not because I owed them anything, but because, for the first time, I felt like I was working with grown adults, not masks. When I eventually left for a better offer, I left by choice, on my terms, with references that reflected the work I'd actually done. Sometimes people ask if exposing Collins changed the company. It didn't. Not really. Companies don't change because one person does the right thing. They change because enough people stop tolerating the wrong thing. But I changed, and that was the point. The last time I walked past the 12th floor conference room, the same room where Collins had humiliated me, I paused at the doorway. The lights were off, chairs stacked, a projector still humming softly. Just a room now, not a battlefield. I didn't feel anger, or triumph, or regret. I felt something cleaner, something quieter. Closure. He gave me 48 hours to clear my desk. I gave myself a life where no one would ever speak to me that way again, and that was the real ending.